Welcome to F101 with Friends, your pit stop for all things Formula One. Whether you're here for the stats, the memes, or just figuring out what a chicane is, we've got you covered. Buckle up, because the fun starts right now. Hi everyone, my name is Nisha, a newbie F1 girlie who is desperate to make more friends so that I can talk about this sport all the time. Each week, a new guest will join me on this journey, from seasoned F1 fans to other curious newcomers, and we will explore what it is about this million-dollar sport at gravity-defying speeds that we just can't stop watching. We'll try to break it all down in a way that's fun, relatable, and hopefully try to explain some of the tech talk. So on the first episode, we spoke a little bit about the history of F1, gave you an idea of what to expect on a race weekend. This episode is going to have more drama, more storytelling. We'll go deeper into who controls the sport and who decides the rules. For that, I need someone who's been following F1 for a while. So please welcome to the show, Kevin Binu. How are you, Kevin?
I am doing well, Nish. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been excited to be here ever since I heard the first episode. But I've been even more excited to be here since we started planning this podcast a year ago.
Yes, exactly. It's taken a while, but we got here. So just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better, what got you into F1?
My dad did. The fondest memory that I have is waking up in the middle of the night once and coming out to the hall to watch my dad just overcome with emotions, catching the final moments of, I'm not too sure what race it was, but it was a very close race. And ever since then, he kind of realized that that was something that I was interested in also. So he'd make it a point to come call out for me whenever there was a race that was about to begin. And we spent a lot of time watching a lot of races throughout these decades. Whatever it is that I know about the sport is thanks to the introduction that my dad gave me. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. So, if you found yourself in a dinner party with all of your favorite F1 drivers, what would you say?
I would ask Max to pick up the bill for once. I'm guessing it's usually some of the... I think the last year it was... who's the one who picked up the driver bill last year for the...
Bottas. It was Bottas. Yes,
Yeah,
the annual driver dinner.
Right. I'm guessing I'm going to ask him to not lay it on the future unemployed driver and maybe pick up the bill himself. I'm sure he's got the credit limit for it. I'm sure he'll be fine.
I'm sure he'll be absolutely fine. They're all millionaires. They'll all be fine. So on this episode, the second episode of our podcast, I wanted to discuss the forces behind the sport. Right? So let's start with the organization that holds the sanctioning rights to F1 and is also known as, and I'm going to do a fake accent here, Fédération Internationale d'Automobile, or the FIA.
The last time I heard French this good was in the movie Ratatouille. I feel like I'm in Paris and I'm chomping on a baguette. So, yeah.
Oui, oui.
Oui, or like Dexter used to say, omelette du fromage.
Fromage, yes, that's the limit of my French. The FIA. So the FIA is an international organization with two primary functions. The mobility division is essentially a lobbying arm for motoring organizations and the automotive industry. The sports division is a governing body for many international motorsport championships, including Formula One. The FIA sets the rules, ensures safety, and oversees fair play in F1, although fair play has been up for debate for quite a while. They have a General Assembly of 243 voting member organizations that spread amongst 147 countries. The head of the FIA and the chairman of the General Assembly is the president, and he is friend of the pod,
Mohammed bin Salem. We have so much to talk about that guy.
Oh, and we will. Another popular president who gets talked about a lot is Jean-Marie Balestre. If you've seen the Senna show, you know who he is. And I love that show. Hate that guy. The actor has done a great job. Basically, it's safe to say that people in power tend to abuse it.
Which is why Spider-Man did say, with great power comes great responsibility.
Why did I assume you were going to say Spider-Man says with great power comes great tendency to abuse it?
I think you watched the pirated version of the movie.
So basically, anything with the word formula in it is run by the FIA. So do you want to guess what the popular ones are?
So right off the bat, since this is an F1 podcast, obviously we've got the Formula One World Championship, right?
Very good guess. Yes.
I remember something about the Rally Championship also. So we've got WRC, which is the World Rally Championship.
Yes, absolutely.
We've got our Electrified Boys, which is the Formula E World Championship.
Superb.
I'm all out of guesses. What do you have for me? What's the last one?
So one we have is the World Endurance Championship.
And enduring is what we're doing with Mohammed bin Sulayem.
Yes, exactly.
He is never coming on the podcast. He is never coming on the podcast.
As long as he doesn't find out where we live, I think we're safe.
That's going to be a problem because me no habla inglés.
So yes, all of this and the F2, F3 feeder series that we talked about will come under the FIA. Let me now introduce FOM or Formula One Management. Simply put, Formula One Management is the commercial arm of F1. It's the reason that the sport isn't just a series of races, but a global spectacle. While the FIA defines the rules and regulations, the FOM controls the money, the media, and the marketing. Before the 1970s, Formula One was chaotic behind the scenes. Each race organizer handled their own deals, television rights were scattered, and the teams had little control over how the prize money was distributed. It was insane. Enter Bernie Ecclestone, a former team owner who saw an opportunity to unify F1's commercial side. Now, there are a lot of interesting stories about Bernie, and one day we will cover all the scams and controversies of F1. We will delve very deep into it. Him and MBS will be recurring characters in a lot of episodes. For now, all you need to know is that Bernie negotiated deals on behalf of all the teams through the newly formed Formula One Constructors Association, which was what the FOM was called before. By 1981, he secured the first Concord Agreement. Now, the Concord Agreement is one of the most fascinating and secretive contracts in sports, although it has been leaked in the past. The first Concord Agreement was between the FIA, FOM, and the teams to dictate three things. First, how is the prize money distributed? Second, what percentage of F1's revenues will the teams receive? And the third, commitments from the teams and the circuits to compete in F1 for a set period, essentially locking them in. Now, new versions have been negotiated every few years and we won't go into all of them, but here are certain highlights. In 1987, we had the second Concord Agreement that ensured that Ecclestone was no longer just a team owner and would lead the FOM. The FOM received 49% of the TV revenues, 1% went to the teams, and 50% to the FIA. The FOM also received all the fees paid by the promoters, and they are the ones who paid out the prize money to the teams.
In 1997, the fourth agreement guaranteed all commercial rights to F1 until December 31st, 2110. That is for more than 100 years to one man. There was no auction for these valuable rights. Bernie was the only bidder and it was priced at a nominal $360 million. In fact, McLaren Williams had protested and argued that there was too much secrecy in these negotiations. Somehow a compromise was reached.
And I'm going to blame all of that on the shady man that Bernie Ecclestone was. 2009, F1 was gaining a lot of popularity. This is right after prime Schumacher years. Alonso was fighting, Kimi Raikkonen was on the scene. This is one of the most interesting years in F1, which means the sport is earning a lot more money, but the teams are still getting a very small slice of the pie. So there was some conflict between teams and Bernie. There was a lot of backstabbing, secret alliances, but once again, Bernie and his clever ways reached a compromise and so the wheel spins on.
Now, in 2017, an American mass media corporation called the Liberty Media Group bought the parent company of the FOM for $4.6 billion. In 2021, the latest version of the Concord Agreement introduced a fairer revenue split among teams and the cost cap to level the playing field. It also protects existing teams by requiring new entrants to pay $200 million upfront, shared equally among 10 existing teams. In exchange, the new team has the rights of revenue share in the first year of competition. Previously, new entrants only received the money from their second year of competition. So, the 2021 agreement is the first to be signed by the Liberty Media Group, headed by Stefano Domenicali. I know I've butchered the name, but
No, it's good. It's Domenicali.
oh, okay, right on. Liberty Group also owns MotoGP, by the way.
They are just on their way to like buy out every single motorsport that there is. But I mean, they see the money in this, right? So I understand why they would go all out.
It's a worthwhile investment also because I remember Formula One under Bernie, which was a totally different game. Uh, I've heard a lot of reports of Bernie's management style and his distribution style to be considered elitist because he was somebody who always believed that Formula One was always destined for greater things. And he wasn't somebody who was very interested in making sure that Formula One reached a wider audience through distribution because his logic was I have Rolex and Omega advertising. I need people who have the money to buy that to watch my sport. And that way he could kind of guarantee high ticket sponsors, but the distribution style significantly hampered the expansion of the sport, which is what Liberty Media Group changed today. I also remember an interview in which somebody had mentioned that he wasn't too open to the idea of drivers coming up on social media and doing a social media promotional campaign for the drivers and the teams. And that's something that the Liberty Media Group has done. They've kind of put their drivers out there. Obviously, while they are following traditional media routes also, they've heavily invested in social media, making it very clear to the teams that if you want more fans, we've got to start getting to where the people are at. I feel like that's genuinely boomed thanks to Drive to Survive also, because once you finish watching an episode, you just type the driver's name in on, online, and you can personally follow their journey and be up to date with the sport a lot more better than maybe reading about it in the newspaper 6 months later, right?
And one, I'm really glad that Liberty Media is here and, we have all of this social media sharing, we get to know the drivers and things like that. The other thing that I've realized is because of its popularity, F1 tickets have been super, super expensive. It's not accessible anymore. Like the sport being there is not very accessible anymore. You can see it on your screen for sure. But right now it's almost saved for just, influencers and people with a lot of money. Although I will say this, when the Liberty Media Group came in, one of the first things that they did was, well, in F1, there was an ancient tradition of having women in interesting clothing standing at the grid, carrying the driver's numbers, right? They were called the grid girls. There's a lot of memes about those as well. But when Liberty Media Group came in, they realized that women are going to be a huge chunk of the market and they don't want to alienate them by putting them in this place. So instead, they introduced grid kids, which is really nice because then you're inspiring a future younger generation of kids to look up to this sport. And at the same time, you're not insulting women. So win-win.
And I feel like that was the change that the sport needed. They came in at the right time and they made the right moves to get to the right audiences, which is why we see this monumental, growth spurt that F1 has.
But coming back to the Concord Agreement, so the 2021 agreement actually ends this year and we will see negotiations starting, I think they must have already started in Jan. But now, with Drive to Survive and all the popularity and influencers, the value of F1 has gone way up. And honestly, this is the year to capitalize on it, which means there is a huge political fight between the FIA and FOM to decide who really controls the sport. So just to recap, the FIA is the governing body of motorsport. Their job is to oversee technical and sporting regulations, enforce rules and penalties, ensure driver safety, and approve new teams and racetracks. The FOM, or Liberty Media Group, handles the business of F1. Their responsibilities include selling broadcasting and sponsorship rights, negotiating contracts with teams and race promoters, and expanding F1's global presence. Now, the real question here is, Kevin, who do you think controls the sport?
As it stands right now, I think it's a good 50-50 split between the two of them. Because if it was entirely on one set of them, be it the FIA or the FOM, let's just call it what it is, the Liberty Media Group, I think there would be certain compromises that are there. Because if you entirely hand it to the FIA, we wouldn't have the sport be as captivating as it is currently, because obviously FOM has the finesse when it comes to broadcasting. There are obviously a lot of goof ups in the broadcast, but credit where credit's due. They have done a pretty good job at it. I feel like a pretty good indicator of that is the Monaco Grand Prix, where a majority of the camera work and the editing, by agreement by the Monaco government, was actually supposed to be carried out by their own people. While the FIA does travel around with their own team, Monaco was only one of the regions where the state government had a say on what the camera work was, and the broadcast essentially. Liberty Media Group came in and changed that completely. So if you watch a lot of footage back from Monaco, from the previous years and the recent years, you will see a very vast difference in the quality of the work also, because Liberty Media Group's kind of standardized the production quality. The other con to that situation is, if you hand it entirely to the Liberty Media Group, we are going to see huge sacrifices that are being made in the name of driver safety. While yes, a lot of it is covered under quote-unquote occupational safety, it is for a lack of better word, it is an extreme sport, and we have had a lot of sports get commercialized for viewing pleasures, and there have been controversies. I'm not saying F1 is shy of any controversies, but at least not at the cost of human life. But if you move these two elements to the side, I think the people who really control the sport are us fans, because we speak with our wallets, and if it wasn't for us, it wouldn't be them. So I think this is the modern day version of watching two gladiators fight it out.
Oh, that is a really cool analogy. And yeah, I agree with you. Giving it to either one of those parties may not really work, because we saw what happened last year at the Las Vegas Grand Prix, or what we saw for the F175 live show at the O2, right, which happened on the 18th. It was entirely controlled by Liberty Media, and they made it more about the dance drama than the actual sport. And I remember, like, the 2023 Las Vegas GP, all of those like dramatic performances and things like that, and then they had the drivers come out of this rising podium and things. You could see the look on like Max's face, and he's just like, I am going to kill someone. I just want to get into my car and do vroom vroom. Okay, that's it. I don't want all this. In fact, the lineup for the O2 for the F175 event is so bad. The only person I recognized was Machine Gun Kelly, and he's not even that great. So it's clearly becoming more a promotional thing. So I understand giving it all the way to FOM is not going to work. On the other side, giving it all the way to FIA with MBS and all of his rules, that is painful. There have been a lot of clashes just last year between the FIA and the FOM. So now we have to talk about everyone's favorite uncle, Mohammed bin Sulayem, or MBS. So the first big clash was on a new team joining the grid, which was Andretti joining along with Cadillac. Our Sheikh MBS decided that his word is law and approved it. And Liberty Media had to pump the brakes and say, no, hold on. This is going to dilute the revenue. We're not on board with this. Liberty Media Group, being a US-based company, and Andretti is also based in the US, decided to get the DOJ involved. And there was a lot of clashes, a lot of court cases, all of that stuff. And now, in 2026, we finally have approval for Cadillac, but not Andretti. So, who really won here?
Andretti did. Cadillac. We've, let's just call it what it is. It is a win for everybody in motorsport, because we bring in a brand new team into the sport. We have slots for up to 24 drivers.
Yes.
And currently we are at 20. So bring in another team. Maybe bring in GMC. Right. I mean, you've got to. This is how manufacturers get into mass markets. I think this is the premise in which NASCAR also operates. You make you've got the cars that look like Camaris driving around the NASCAR track.
True.
So this would be a great way to get people to be interested in your vehicles. So I genuinely feel like it is a win for Cadillac, and at a point of time where their conventional vehicle sales are seeing a decline after whatever the historic rises that they've had through the decades. I don't think the recession and the fall of Detroit did them too many favors. I feel like this is a good comeback for them because they are making some mean machines. Like there was, I'm sure everybody's seen it at some point in time that these vehicles, they're hybrid vehicles that run the Enduro Championships. Oh, they sound so mean when they started. You can hear the screaming eagles when they switch over to the the gasoline powered engines, but it's just a spectacle in itself. So
in the background, someone screaming, "What the hell is a kilometer?"
And we all know that's Logan Sargent. That's his new role. Right. And on that note, the second clash was that the FIA took on F1 Academy CEO Susie Wolf, accusing her of leaking confidential information that she got from her husband, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff. The FIA claims that they got a complaint from one of the other teams. This backfired spectacularly when all the teams put out the same statement, which essentially said, "We didn't complain, we love Susie, we support F1 Academy, jump off a bridge, MBS." I'm paraphrasing on the last line, but it did have that underlying theme. I remember the time when these statements were put out on social media. It kind of looks like copy my homework, but make it look a little bit different. I don't remember a time where I'd seen F1 teams unite so unanimously to show support for somebody. And it was pretty refreshing to see that, because I think that moment right there also showed both the managing parties, that by that I mean the FIA and the FOM, that if the teams decide to, they can come together, right? And that was a pretty good message, because since then it's only strengthened the resolve that, the teams and the drivers have to stand up for themselves against the organizations that they work in. So
yes,
I guess it's a good reminder.
And just for some context, F1 Academy is another series which is specifically for girls and women to join motorsports, right? So they use modified F4 cars, and they have about 6 or 7 races along the same calendar as F1 in certain places that we will see F1 drivers go as well. And on that grid, every team that we have in F1 has their own car, and they have their own driver come from their driver academy who they really support. It's not like, oh, this is some sidey thing that we're doing, like Alpine, for example. So the winner for F1 Academy last year was Abby Pulling from Alpine, and they were so happy. Granted, this was their only win, but still, they were so happy about it, and they really celebrated. So it's really nice to see everyone just come together and tell MBS to basically jump off a bridge. MBS also fought about the number of races. The FIA wanted it reduced, but they still wanted more sprint races. But obviously, this doesn't work for Liberty Media, who are on a spree, registering things like Chicago F1, Dubai Bus Stand F1, your mother's house F1. They don't care.
I would love to tune in to watch your mother's house F1. I feel like that's the basis for a lot of F1, your mama jokes to come. I feel like the sport does have some room to expand on the current roster of races that it has. But sitting in the comfort of my own house, it's very easy for me to say that, because I'm not out on the track, not away from my family for about half of the year. I'm sure that the drivers who might be listening to this podcast, wishful thinking, might have a few choice words for me. But on that note of choice words is swearing or saying bad things about the FIA. These F1 drivers, going at about 300 kilometers per hour, making split-second decisions, are apparently not allowed to get angry on the radio anymore, because kids are watching. Yes, I remember that happening, because the previous F1 kids were not allowed to watch. It was it's a very new concept. In fact, this year, first year offence is punishable by €40,000 fine. A second offence is €80,000 fine and a 1-month suspension from competition. At which point, I would recommend picking up another sport, excelling in it. As you know, Bottas really loves to cycle. I'm guessing he had a backup ready to go in case of any incident. And in terms of a third offence, we're looking at about €120,000 fine, a 1-month suspension, and a deduction of championship points. And on the note of a 1-month suspension, I think we have some weekends which are a triple header. I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 of them, and that's essentially 3 races that you're totally out of the points for. And as we've come to see through the F1 seasons, you might be a team that might be in the lower half, the 11 to 20, but you give just the right amount of mess ups and red flags, and you could end up on the podium securing second and third position for the team. Yep, you know what I'm talking about. But obviously the stakes are a lot more higher when you're right up at the top, because I think during our previous season we had races that were decided towards the final three races, right? The 3 or 4 races, and imagine for whatever reason you had a suspension. I also found out that the penalties also apply to all FIA license holders, which would include F1 team principals, which might explain why Haas got rid of Gunther Steiner, because I'm sure it was eating into their also little budget that they had. But there is also currently talk that they won't be airing the team radios, which would really suck.
Yeah, I don't understand this reasoning at all, because if they're going to say, oh, kids are watching and that's why we don't want, to have all of these swearing, like whatever, out there, let them watch F1 Kids, because it's great. The kid commentators are actually really, really good. And the animations are pretty fun. So every time like the driver overtakes, you'll see like an animation of that driver like dancing on the screen and stuff. It's cute because it's for kids. Let them watch that instead.
Yeah, we've also had a lot of pop culture moments thanks to the team radio, such as and I want you to complete my sentences.
Okay.
Bono, my tires are
gone.
Right. Valtteri.
Oh, it's James.
There we go. And who can forget the famous one from ex-race director? Michael Massey.
Yeah, Toto, it's motor racing, okay? We went motor racing.
There we go. That's the one. Yeah, perfect. I'm sure that I think it's Bose that makes the headphones that the team principal was using. That right there was an on-the-spot durability test for them. I don't think that's something that they'd quite figured out, because to see it shatter in slow-mo was really, really, really beautiful. I had also seen a video online where I'm sure that there's this one guy who runs around the track, who's part of the broadcasting team, who has the slow-mo camera. So majority of the slow-mo shots that you actually see are because he's at the right place at the right time. A lot of the recording that he does is obviously post-incident, because I guess his workflow is that he takes the shot and on camera itself he makes the cuts and stuff, and then he sends it to the broadcast center. So that's obviously another facet of the Formula One production that we get to find out a lot more about, when these dives that the Liberty Media Group does, into the background of what happens in Formula One. So yeah.
To everyone who's interested in seeing one of those slow-mos, last year there was one with Carlos Sainz when he crashed out at a particular race. I can't remember which track it was. And they did this amazing slow-mo of him like walking towards his garage with just like one drop of sweat. Anyway, let's...
Right. Okay, it's not that kind of a podcast. We are still keeping it PG-13. So let's get back to
for the kids. For the kids.
Yeah, for the kids. Yes. There we go. Yeah.
Actually, so it's funny that you've brought this up, because recently there was a World Rally the World Rally Championship is going on, and one of the teams got fined €10,000 for saying the sentence, "We effed up yesterday." Thank you for that. But yeah, he's talking about his own performance, right? His own like team messing up, and then they got they got fined €10,000 for it, thanks to MBS. So
right, and I'd imagine where exactly is it that all this money is going, because I'm sure that a lot of it does find its way back. I mean, in the most ideal world, it finds itself back into the R&D and improvement of the sport, but I hope that there are bits and pieces of it that do make it towards, CSR initiatives also, right? Because I'm sure that there are a lot of good causes that they could put the money towards also.
That is an interesting thing that you brought up, and we will cover it in a bit, because this takes me to the Grand Prix Drivers Association, or the GPDA. So this serves as the collective voice of Formula One drivers, advocating for their interests in areas such as safety, regulations, and professional conduct. Founded in 1961 and then refounded in 1994, it has organized several driver strikes and boycotts over the years, primarily in response to unsafe circuits on the F1 calendar and other driver safety issues. To give you a little bit of history, ahead of the 1994 season, the FIA had banned electronic driver aids such as active suspension and traction control. This was done in like the middle of the 1993 season, and it was criticized by a lot of drivers who believed that it would lead to a lot of unsafe design flaws in the 1994 cars because car development happens a year in advance. This unfortunately turned out to be true, and we lost one of the world's greatest drivers. And we'll talk about this a little bit when we discuss safety. Before the next race, after the unfortunate incident happened, famous drivers like Niki Lauda, Christian Fittipaldi, Michael Schumacher, and Gerhard Berger re-established the GPDA with assistance from Martin Brundle.
For those of you who watch the F1 races, you know that Brundle is actually a very popular commentator right now, and we love the banter that he, Crofty, and Ted Kravitz have. I think they're over at the international broadcast, aren't they, as opposed to the F1 Live, right?
Yes, they're on the Sky Sports broadcast. And we know everyone's going to say, oh, British bias, blah, blah, blah. Yes, true, but they also have British humor. So I don't really mind listening to them. Of course, I will switch over if I know that Nico Rosberg, former F1 driver, is on the F1 TV commentary because his insights are amazing. So I will change for Nico Rosberg.
Oh, are you talking about Nico Rosberg, who ended up winning in the same machinery as Lewis Hamilton? That Nico Rosberg?
And Michael Schumacher?
Oh, right. Good point. Right.
Yes, yes, that Nico Rosberg. Back to the GPDA, there are 4 active drivers as of 23rd Feb 2025. George Russell, driver for Mercedes. Carlos Sainz for Atlassian Williams Racing, who will be taking over the role that Sebastian Vettel used to play. Legal advisor Anastasia Fowl, the first non-F1 driver to be appointed a GPDA director, and former Formula 1 driver Alexander Wurz, who serves as the chairman. So why is this relevant now? Well, in the constant battle between FIA and Liberty Media Group, the people truly getting crushed by the wheel seem to be the drivers and the teams. They are racing more, doing more media interactions, have Drive to Survive mics on their heads at all points of time, and they have to deal with all of these ridiculous rules, and they are pissed, understandably.
Absolutely true. This controversy began when Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc faced penalties for using profane language during official press conferences. Honestly, it wasn't even that bad, an odd F-bomb here and there. To be fair though, English is not their first language and they learnt everything being around mechanics. What do you expect? Verstappen was assigned community service ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix, while Leclerc received a €10,000 fine during the Mexican Grand Prix.
In reaction to these sanctions, the GPDA released a statement essentially covering 1. Language use. The FIA needs to differentiate between casual swearing and language intended as an insult, suggesting that context matters when evaluating such incidents. 2nd is call for respectful dialogue. The association urged FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem to treat drivers as professionals and adults and not scrutinize things like jewelry or the underwear that they wear. I understand that the youngest rookie is 18 years old Kimi Antonelli, but there are adults there, right? There is Fernando Alonso who's there at 43 years old. Why can't they treat everyone like adults?
Which is true, but Fernando Alonso is technically, like we all love to say it in the sport, the youngest rookie that we have.
So the third statement that the GPDA had released was on financial transparency. This one is my favorite because the GPDA questioned how these funds, all these fines that they're collecting are utilized within the FIA. Like you asked, if does it go into community service or is it going into R&D? My guess, it goes directly into MBS's pocket.
I'd imagine a scene like, you've seen the animation, the Scrooge animation, right? Where he's jumping into a pool of money and he comes out swimming. So I'm imagining that's what happens. But again, it's just my imagination running amok. Or it could be true. You never know.
You never know.
Right.
You never know. Either way, the FIA have elected to be silent. So that's just where it stands. Now, I can't talk about the GPDA without talking about safety and how it relates to legitimately one of the greatest drivers of all time and his unfortunate death. In 1994 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola in Italy, Ayrton Senna, a 3-time world champion and Brazil's heart, unfortunately passed away in a horrific collision at the peak of his career. Senna's legacy became more than his incredible talent. It became the driving force behind making F1 safer for every driver who stepped into a car after him. Now, there are two important safety devices that I want to highlight here. The first is the HANS, or the head and neck support. It's a collar-like safety feature that was introduced to minimize the effects of the extreme G-forces during high-impact crashes. It's a lightweight carbon fiber collar designed in the shape of a U. The curvature is positioned in the back of the neck with two adjacent arms resting on the top of the chest. The collar, supported by the shoulders, is secured under the driver's safety belts and tethered to the helmet. So it kind of looks like a custom-made neck pillow, and you'll see like at the end of a lap or at the end of a race when the drivers get down, they slowly click these things out and take it out of their necks. That is the HANS device. The HANS device has actually reduced force on the neck by over 80% in an impact. It works kind of like a seatbelt and prevents that violent head snapping motion.
Yes, the HANS device has made tremendous strides in preventing drivers from getting whiplash, which is again one of the major causes of injury for us road users, right? Which is what the seatbelt kind of does, where it manages to restrain us. The head moving back and forth motion kind of ends up putting tension on the rest of our body, which the HANS device tends to eliminate. Now, while it wasn't originally created for F1, it became mandatory in F1 in 2003. And it's used in almost all forms of motorsport, including NASCAR. Since its introduction, no F1 driver has died of a neck injury during a crash.
The second one is the Halo, which is a little bit more controversial. Initially, single-seater racing used to have fully open cockpits. In 2018, the Halo was introduced, which is like a titanium ring that surrounds the cockpit to protect a driver's head from flying debris or collisions. Fans and drivers initially criticized it for being ugly and obstructing the car's sleek design, but there was a need for it. Whether it was Felipe Massa getting hit by debris thrown at him at top speed, almost losing his eye, or some fatal incidents in IndyCar. The Halo can withstand the weight of a double-decker bus, which is almost 12 tons, and it has saved lives, like Charles Leclerc in 2018 when Fernando Alonso's car flew over his cockpit, or in the controversial year of 2021, Lewis versus Max at Monza, when Max hit a curb and was launched over Lewis's head. Hamilton later has said that he felt the impact and was even struck on the helmet by the wheel, but the Halo prevented it from causing serious harm. And he was one of the people who was against it in 2018.
That's actually a good point. Romain Grosjean was very vocal about his, I want to say, dislike about the Halo. I imagine that there were certain views that were raised about it hampering the visibility that drivers have.
Yep.
And to quote Romain Grosjean from the incident that happened in 2020, when he survived a fiery crash in Bahrain after his car split into two, when he went through the safety guardrail at the start of the race, when I think he got clipped by somebody and he kind of spun in, right? He was on his hospital bed when he said, and I quote, "I wasn't for the Halo some years ago, but I think it's the greatest thing we brought to Formula One, and without it, I wouldn't be able to speak to you today." And to see the 180 shift that he has made truly tells you about the device and the impact that it has on somebody. I think in most recent history, we've had the Halo also serve its purpose for Joe Gonview.
Oh, yes.
When his Alfa Romeo flipped over and hit the catch fence over at the British Grand Prix. And that was one of the reasons why he did not end up suffering a head injury, because the Halo did its job when he was scraping across the ground at how many ever so kilometers an hour. And to see him walk away from that was truly miraculous.
I remember seeing that, the car just like doing multiple 360s and then getting stuck in that barrier. And then I remember George basically aborted his race, like he got down to go and help him. And then that kind of hampered his points for that race, but he was just like, you know what? Someone may have got really badly hurt here. So
Absolutely.
maybe that's why he's the
president, right?
Maybe that's why he's the president for the GPDA.
Well, that, and he gives off very mean girls energy. But that's something where you got to give credit. You know, I think motor racing, that for those of us who've been following F1 for a while, There have been incidences where we've had drivers crash out and maybe drivers' cars stall out, and we've always had other drivers come to the rescue. You talked about Senna, right? And during one of the unfortunate crashes that had happened just a few races before his untimely demise, he was one of the first people on scene to lift his co-driver's foot off the accelerator because it was pumping fuel. If you watch the Senna documentary, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to give too much away right now, but I feel like with all the modern day regulations and rules that we have, we sadly don't see a lot more drivers stopping to help. And while I understand that the amount of things that you can do as a driver is obviously limited because you have medical teams on staff and you have trained specialists, it's that sportsman spirit, when a person that you're competing with and that you travel the world around with is going through something, that you want to be there for them. And I feel like that's obviously something that's been taken away from us, but I guess that's just what racing is nowadays, right?
That's true. But then, like you said, we have seen a lot more safety measures being put in place, a lot more like medical cars and this and that. Everything is within access, right? Like when Daniel Ricciardo broke his wrist as he bumped into the wall, right? He was immediately rushed to a hospital, and he was like, Lance Stroll stepped in, told him about his wrist guy because he had just suffered the beginning of that year. So, and we saw Daniel come back into racing within a couple of weeks. So, all in all, good for safety. The last thing we need to clarify is who looks at every race and decides what is wrong and what is just motor racing. Shout out Michael Massey. So we have race control that acts as the command center for a Grand Prix weekend, overseeing everything that happens on the track in real time. It's staffed by a team of FIA officials, including the race director, who is the leader of race control, responsible for all overall race management. The race director controls practice, qualifying, and the race, making sure that the timetable is followed properly. If necessary, the race director can propose changes in the timetable. For example, if there's a heavy rain that delays a session. This is currently held by Rui Marquez, whose announcement was not made to the drivers. Charles literally in an interview said that he found out about it on social media. So I'm going to pin this on MBS again, because I just enjoy pinning things on MBS.
I absolutely love how we found out the same way that Charles did, as in a social media post. Maybe they're not so much more different than us.
Then you have the race starter. The permanent starter's job is to oversee start procedures at the beginning of the races. This involves activating the lights out sequence once cars have lined up on the grid and making sure that the standing starts are completed safely. In September 2023, Rebecca Lee became the FIA's first female official F1 starter.
And I think one of the reasons why we have an official race starter is there was an incident that had happened where teams would exploit the timing of the start light by using technology to receive an early warning signal. This essentially allowed them to react to the start and start the race just slightly before the lights went out, giving them a small but potentially significant advantage. How they would do this is they would intercept the signal, the broadcast signal from the race director to initiate the light sequence, and analyzing it, they could kind of get an idea and they would send an auditory clue to the driver just before it started so that they could get going. It was during the 1999 European Grand Prix that the FIA deliberately altered the timing of the lights to catch teams who were suspected of using this cheating method, resulting in many drivers jumping the start because their systems were expecting the usual timing. And that's a good thing that you have to check out on YouTube. I'm sure that there's videos of it online where you could see just a whole bunch of cars just making a move ahead.
Yes.
And that's literally when you catch them with their pants down, I'm guessing, right?
I've seen that video. I'll include the link in our description so that our listeners can go and check that out as well. Race control also decides when to deploy safety car or initiate a virtual safety car period in response to any accidents or hazards. Currently, the safety car itself is being driven by a former German race driver, Bernard Maylander. Race control also includes marshals and track officials that are positioned around the circuit to handle incidents, clear away debris, and communicate track conditions. So if you see during the race someone's side view mirror has just popped off their car and fallen on the track, they might initiate either a virtual safety car or a safety car to make sure that there's gap over there, and one of the marshals that are positioned around that area of the track will step in, run in, pick up the debris and walk away.
I had also recently found out that a lot of the F1 marshals, if not all of them, that you see around the track are volunteers. They're just doing it for the love of the sport. So imagine, I'm guessing there's a few weekends that you've got to spend, obviously training up for it, keeping up with the requirements that are there to be a marshal, and as well as taking time out to be there for the race weekend. And the reward that they have is they get a front seat, front seat to all the action, and also sometimes kind of chip in and help out during incidents. And I'm also guessing that they do manage to get little keepsakes. I am not necessarily sure how that works out, but I mean, if you see me at a track walking away with what looks like a front wing stuck under my overalls, don't tell anybody.
Race control operates from a dedicated control room at every circuit with multiple screens displaying live footage, timing data, and team communications. They speak with the teams, the FIA, and the stewards to ensure that the races run smoothly.
Now, unlike race control, which manages the race in real time, the stewards function more like referees, reviewing incidences and enforcing the rules. They're independent from race control and rotate every race based on where they're racing. They typically consist of 3 stewards, one of who will be appointed a chairman, and are nominated by the FIA from an international pool of people who hold the necessary FIA super license, which is different from the driver super license. And we also have a driver steward, a former F1 driver who provides insights from a competitor's perspective. Now, stewards are the ones who investigate incidences such as collisions, trap limit violations, and unsafe releases from the pit lane. They review footage, telemetry, and the team radio before deciding on penalties like time penalties, 5 seconds, 10 seconds of drive-thrus, grid drops for the next race, any point deductions on a driver super license, and in extreme cases, race disqualifications.
While both of them work closely together, race control is about real-time decision-making, while the stewards are more focused on post-incident reviews and rule enforcement. The race director does not have the power to penalize drivers. That's the job of the stewards. So sometimes when we hear the teams or drivers complain about being run off the track or being attacked or "he fully turned into me," said George Russell, the race director reports all these incidents to the stewards for investigation. The stewards then judge the incident using video data, telemetry, rulebook, precedents, all kinds of things. And then they come to a decision on whether the penalty is required and what penalty. Race control then relays this judgment to the teams and the broadcast.
On the topic of video data, there's a video of Matt Amos that I just watched which talks about a driver cam that most of us, if not any of us, have seen. So we usually see a driver's heads-up view when they're racing, and usually that's almost always from a camera that's on the lower half, right above their steering wheel, that's pointing, looking straight at the driver. But did you know that there is a camera that's in the halo? Now, yep, that's something that the video kind of pointed out. And one of the reasons why we don't see it is because the halo is also covered in aerodynamical elements. So it's very hard to see it. But if you watch the video, or if you get a chance to look at the wreckage of Roman Grosjean's car, you can actually see the wires that come out of it. So now the section where the bottom pillar meets the top of the halo, there is a camera that's pointing right at the driver. And from the video, it does onboard video storage that's on the device, as well as it sends video to the vehicle's black box. It starts recording from the time the vehicle is set off and has enough storage to cover the whole race and a little bit more. And this is usually what the stewards use in when they judge incidences and stuff like that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I had no idea. And I'll make sure to include that link in the description so then our listeners can see that too. Kevin, I do feel like we've been speaking for about 400 hours. So we need to wrap up this deep dive into the forces that keep F1 running, whether it's the FIA making the rules, Liberty Media shaping the spectacle, or the GPDA ensuring drivers' voices are heard. We've looked into who holds the power, who enforces the rules, and how safety innovations have saved lives. But before we sign off, I need to hear from my guest, Kevin. What is your boldest prediction for the 2025 season?
My boldest prediction for the 25 season is that I feel like this could be the year of the rookies. And I'm not talking about Alonso. I'm talking about the new guys on the block. This year, we're very lucky to see a fair amount of new talent that is joining teams. And this essentially gives us a mix and match of people whose skills and driving styles that we know against the new kids on the block who have something to prove. Because if the previous season has told us anything, is that if you don't step up and perform, you are going to get on the cutting block. And
Yep.
you could be a superstar at whatever the series that you fed through from was, but F1's a whole different, animal. And if the animal doesn't get fed, you're just going to get chewed up and spit out. So I'm excited to see what the new season has in store for us. But I also feel like this season is going to be very pivotal in shaping the 26 season. I know that's very forward, but I think we're looking at major changes to the regulations in 26 again, right? And
Yes.
this year, a lot of the actions that the teams and the drivers take will again end up significantly impacting whatever the scope of the season is for 26. On that note, what's your boldest prediction for 25?
My boldest prediction is that Interlagos is going to be an insane race this year because of the rookies. As every year that we have seen, Senna reigns upon Interlagos in Brazil, and it is already difficult for professional, seasoned F1 drivers to race in the rains, right? We saw Max do an incredible job last year. Now imagine 6 rookies, all just trying to control their tires and control their car in torrential rain. That is what I want. That is my boldest prediction. Interlagos is going to be the best race because it's just going to be bowling balls at this point.
It absolutely is going to be the best race. And I think that, when Max was new on track, just around the time he was getting started, I think his wet race performance was absolutely amazing for somebody who hadn't spent as much time in a car as he has, because he trained in the rain, from the time that he spent at karting.
Yes.
I guess a lot of the new drivers are on Project Verstappen when they were growing up. So I'm sure that we could actually maybe see drivers that are way far more skilled on the rain than maybe the people who've spent a lot of time in the season, because I guess rain is the biggest equalizer. You could have the fastest car, you could have the best reaction times and everything, but when everything is sliding out from under you, right, when you're so used to practicing and expecting grip at maybe 230 kilometers an hour going around a corner, let's say turn 1, when you add rain to the equation, it totally changes all the dynamics that you're used to, right? And with rain, obviously when you're on dry conditions, you've just got your grip to worry about and changing grip conditions. But when it comes to the rain, you've obviously got, different levels of wetness, as well as possibly, the racetrack drying up and stuff like that. So that would be something interesting for us this year to look at. So again, I genuinely hope for your sake that the race is going to be a good one, because I really don't want another repeat of the Monaco traffic jam simulator 2025.
No, I don't think that's gonna happen. I'm also hoping that we don't see another, as you called it last year, silk board signal situation.
Shout out to all my Bangalore peeps.
Yes, exactly. Oh, Kevin, one thing I'm sure you would be excited to know is apparently Lance Stroll has been testing out other cars, like rally cars. Maybe he's switching championships.
Which might make sense, because he spent a lot of time in the gravel when he spun out in Interlagos. And I'm sure he was just, making himself look nice for all his potential future WRC employers. But if that means that we get an open seat up at Aston Martin, I'll be more than happy to take it. Alonso has time and time again proven that he is a senior figure for a good reason in the sport. I remember the amount of aggression and, just showmanship that man had, because we've all seen the moments where he's getting on cars and doing different animal poses and dancing, and he's genuinely sobered down throughout the years and actually, played a very big role in shaping the future of Formula 1 drivers. He, in a lot of the initial races of the season, also took Lance under his wing. On live radio, you've heard the moments where he's kind of, coaching them through whatever it is that needs to be done and stuff like that. So, Alonso deserves a good teammate. I'm not saying that Lance is bad. See, we are at the pinnacle of motorsport. Yes, you can buy a seat, but that's not your only barrier to entry. You need a super license, you need points, and you need everything. So, as much as people dismiss the people who fall on the bottom 10 of the 20, they have every reason to be there.
Absolutely
be it that they paid for it or they earned it.
So we have one more episode before we start talking about the tracks itself. So to prepare you for 2025, we will be talking next week about the 2024 season and catch you up on the main storylines and character arcs. Hopefully all of the fun stuff that the new season of Drive to Survive will miss. It releases on March 7th, by the way. You can go watch that if you want, if you're a boring person, or you come to our episode. To our amazing listeners, what do you think? Drop your hot takes in the comments and send us a message or tag us in your wildest predictions. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share F101 with friends because this community is just getting started. If you have any queries or you want to be a friend on the pod, please reach out to me on Instagram. The link is in the description. Thank you, Kevin, for being on this episode. I've been your host, Nisha, and I'll see you on the next episode of F101 with Friends.